brand new technology, folks. This is Restream. So there's a slight delay while I make sure that I can acclimate and everything else. I have on another famous YouTuber, Nate the Lawyer. And I'm sure many of you know him from Viva Fry fame. And Nate, being such a courteous person, gets to be my first victim with the new technology because I know that he has to deal with technology himself. And I figured that, oh well, he'll be more patient and tolerating me. How are you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's a struggle. It's the YouTube struggle, as they say. So
It definitely is. And you add a little extra technology to the mix, and it's like, oh boy, I might even have my cat jumping on me with the luck I'm having right now.
Well, my daughter might run out here, and it's funny because there was one time I was filming something, and so I'm filming, and I just didn't realize that behind me, my youngest daughter runs out, and she's in underwear and running back and forth and like waving, because I'm filming, but I'm just looking at the camera and I can't see myself. So then I cut the video, and I'm like, I got a baby running behind me naked. It was insane, but yeah.
Oh, right. Well, now I wanted to get you on here, and I actually was going to do this as an interview, but then I thought, no, you've been on as a live stream before. Let's try a hybrid. I can learn about who you are, who's Nate Broady, what's his background, everything else. Did a little research and said, OMG, okay. And being able to do it with the audience, and then maybe we can mix in current events, maybe not. I mean, obviously, I'd love to have you on the regular. I know I put that out there before, so we can always jump back in and have more conversations later.
Awesome. No, I'm please. I'm definitely game. 110%.
Oh, fantastic. Now, let's just start out your crazy background. It sounds to me like I could just be watching The Wire and insert Nate Broady.
Pretty much so. I've had a very colorful life, to say the least. But I'll start from, I'm from Harlem, USA, born and bred. My parents, and this is where things get, I kind of hate going right to the bad part, but it just,
Sure.
it's just who I am. I'm the son of two crackheads. My mom was a crackhead, and my father was a crackhead. And like my first memories in life was actually us growing up in an abandoned building. And it's funny because every morning, when I became a professor at the law school, every morning I would drive my wife to work, and we actually had to drive past the building that I grew up in. It was abandoned at the time, and we lived in the abandoned building. My father used to actually have to put a mattress in front of the door to stop people from coming in. Yeah, and we used to, and when the lights went down, we used to have to do candle lights, and it was interesting because we still had for heat. He took a car battery and used to like jimmy it up to get like a heater and all that stuff. So, but that's, it's not a crazy story in Harlem because, a lot of times in the inner cities, that's kind of what you deal with, right? It's just, there's a high amount of poverty, and we're talking about the, 80s, early to mid 80s, going into the 90s, where it was really, really bad. And then you had
Pre-Giuliani, right?
Pre-Giuliani, yeah. It was, matter of fact, I remember the first time I ever saw Giuliani was on a news report of how bad. Now, get this: how bad drugs were in New York City. We used to have a federal senator. His name was Alphonse D'Amato. He's a Republican senator from New York. Yes, New York used to have a Republican senator, Alphonse D'Amato, and they wanted to show how bad the drug situation here was in New York. So Rudy Giuliani and Alphonse D'Amato go undercover, right? So he's the sitting U.S. attorney and the sitting senator for the state of New York. They jump in a van. They go to Washington Heights, and they got a news crew with them in this van. they pull up to they pull up to a bodega.
Don't notice them at all. It's total undercover work here.
Yeah, no undercover work. So they literally go to a bodega and was like, "Yo, can we buy some cocaine?" They don't even say, base. Can we buy some cocaine? And the guy's like, You could buy whatever you want. And you have the guy ask me, like, this is the U.S. attorney, and this is the senator for the state of New York. You're like, well, how much do they need? Right? It was that bad. But it shows you just a microcosm of how bad it was. The precinct where I grew up was one of the smallest precincts in New York City. But it had the highest murder rate for like 3 straight years. So we had the smallest precinct with the highest murder rate. And that was, that was that. It's interesting now because a lot of times you'll think about like, how did you survive through all that? But it wasn't, we didn't consider it surviving. We just, we just lived it. So that's, my background. My background is, welfare, all the horror stories that you hear of the Black experience in America. That was my childhood. My childhood was that.
Lovely. It sounds, especially when you describe that, a senator going down there with the U.S. attorney, that sounds particularly desperate.
Yes.
To just say, we literally don't freaking care. Even if we go to prison, that's 3 hots a day.
Yeah. And to a certain extent, that was, it was, the situation really was, everybody was kind of just maintaining. And I call it the height of liberal hypocrisy in New York City, because my mom was, she was a domestic violence survivor, and so she ran from my father because he would threaten to kill her and all that stuff. So eventually that's what he did. She ran, and she took us. So one night we just, she told us maybe like a week before, hey, keep your toys, what toys do you guys want to take, what things. And we're like, what are you talking about? Where we're going? She's like, oh no, we're not going anywhere. Just, then I remember she bought a suitcase one time and she had put like a whole bunch of stuff in the suitcase. So we're like, so one time when we were trying to get dressed, I was like, oh, where's the suitcase? She's like, no, go get the clothes from here. And then that night, my aunt drove up, and my mom got those suitcases, ran downstairs. She said, grab whatever you can. We jumped in a car, and we drove to Florida. And we drove directly to Florida. And I hadn't seen my father at that point. I was like 10, and I hadn't seen my father until I was like 15 or something like that, after 15, 16 after that. So it was that type of thing. And then when we got to but she had escaped my father's abuse, but unfortunately she didn't escape the addiction.
Right.
So the addiction did follow us down to Florida, and we kind of had the same situation. And then, about 14, we then, my grandmother, and again, this is just the same story that you'll hear from any Black family. We were sleeping in a car in Florida. And I remember that night, we were sleeping in a car, and my uncle, who was living in Florida, and he was a disabled vet. So he had my mom come to his house, and then he gave my mom like $100 to go to the store, but he knew that she wouldn't come back. He knew that I was giving her $100. He knew that she would go on a crack binge or whatever.
So
but he knew so he had to give her enough money so she would go for a while. So he gave her, I'm not sure if it's 100, but $150. And then one of the most interesting things happened. We actually had to run for my mom. So my mom ran for my father, and then we had to run for my mom. So then they sent us up to New York to look for my grandmother. And that was, our life. So then, now we got my grandmother, who's an elderly woman, has 2 young African-American boys who have had no structure, no discipline, no anything. So that was another horror story, you know what I'm saying? And she was trying to raise children in the 1980s and 1990s as children in the 1950s. So there was a lot of, just a lot of issues just with that alone. So, that was my childhood. I dropped out of high school. I sold drugs. It was just that was just, it's funny because when you tell people, when you're 13, 14 years old and you sell drugs, people just say, well, how, why would you do that? People don't understand. It was like, what else were we going to do to live? My mom wasn't there. I was at one point when I was, 12 or 13. My sister was pregnant. Unfortunately, I had an older sister who got pregnant, and it was me and my younger brother who was 6, and I was 12, and I was making more money than both my parents combined. I was taking care of the whole household.
Have you read Freakonomics by chance?
I have read Freakonomics.
Okay, well, there's a study, and the reason I'm bringing it up is there's a study in there about how the average drug runner, especially when you get to the low level, was making essentially less money than an employee at McDonald's. That doesn't sound to be true in your case.
No, well, the way it worked for us, well, for me, I would make in a night, I could make up to $300. It all depends on how long I stay out there.
Is this the 90s or 80s?
It was the late 80s, early 90s.
That's a lot.
So it's about $100 to maybe $300. $100 was probably the regular amount, like $90. But on like a good weekend, and then when things start really hitting, like with heroin and crack, because the way it works is that a lot of people think it's like some big super secret thing. It wasn't that. You had somebody who you knew. The reason why they were younger people, people like, my age, 12, 13, is because if you get caught by the cops, you're not getting in trouble, nothing like that's going to happen. And come to find out, some of the cops in that area were actually on the take. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the Dirty 30, but yeah, the dirt, my neighborhood was within the Dirty 30. So look up the Dirty 30 and you'll see what I'm talking about. Where the cops were drug dealers and stealing from one drug dealer and giving.
So it didn't stop a Serpico?
No. It was that's just like Google it's the Dirty 30 precinct, the 30th precinct. They've changed it all now, but that's what it was. So I was like the main breadwinner of the family, at 12, 13 years old. But that was, it was a short time, but that's just what we did to survive. And I don't know how to explain it. It's weird looking at it now because we can all, it's like you can judge it now from where we're at now, from when it was. But looking back at it, you just say, how desperate was it? But it was, those were desperate times.
And it probably didn't, maybe I'm wrong. It might not have felt desperate. I mean, it probably felt like Monday.
Yeah, it did.
Like every day was, there's a saying about war, and that is hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that existence, I just think about it, and I've been around bad crowds, things like that, and it's boring. It's sitting there all day long, really not doing a whole hell of a lot, and then cops will show up or something, and it's like, leap, we better go run. Was it something like that?
To be honest with you, the cops really didn't give us any problems because, it just was what it was. I'm assuming that money was exchanging hands. Like, I was making deals on the street, here's the stuff, I would see cop cars walk by. Nobody would say anything. Nobody, I didn't run from the cops at that point in time, but things did change later on. Things did change. What to say? How? Oh, can I need a drug?
How do I get?
you got
get into this drug dealing? I need a job.
You unfortunately need to know somebody. I remember the way it used to work for us, though, if people just want to know, is that we had a hookup where the person would give you what they would do is they everything was already packaged. So they would prepackage everything and just give it to you. Like, so if you're selling crack, which came a little later, but if you're selling whatever you're selling, weed, crack, whatever, it's already come prepackaged. So they would give you, let's say, $500 worth of product and say, okay, you're supposed to give me back, $250. And then, so what we'd do is we'd go out there, me and my homeboy, we'd go out there and we'd make his money first, right? We go out there and make his $250 first. So he got his $250. Yeah. And then I would give him his $250, and then whatever I had left, that was my money, So and the numbers would be different, but it would, because we had the $500 to give him to get the stuff. But that's the way we do it. And it was a nice system. He would re-up us whenever we need to. There was no cell phones at the time, so you had to physically go to the place, and then you go and you see all the women and everything like that. Because these guys, the drug dealers back then, were celebrities. They had the best cars, they had the beautiful women, they had all the money. So that's just what it was.
Well, now, how did you not get addicted, or did you?
No, it's interesting. I never took anything like, when I got to college, I smoked weed and things of that nature, but I never took anything hard like that because the one thing that always scared me was crack cocaine and cocaine. And that's
Mm,
because I saw the way it made my parents act.
mm,
And I remember there was one time when my mom had taken it and she was just so gone, and it was just like, just going to school and just being told about how it damages it, and because it wasn't like we didn't know how bad it was, but when you go to school they tell you how bad it is, and then you go home and you're like, it can't really be that bad, and then I was able to experience how bad it was. So to me it just became a business. It's like, I'm selling, it's like me selling something, but I'm
mm.
not using it. And it was, I don't know. And when you're young too, they were it was like, if you're young, we used to make fun of crackheads. So that was like
Mm.
another incentive on not to do anything like that. And most time, kids weren't using those type of drugs. We were honestly selling to like the Vietnam vets, people like that, people that come home, that type of thing. So, it was that type of situation.
Well, your brother was born addicted too, right? That
My
so how
brother was
did he
born to
stay out of it?
Yes, he was born addicted to crack cocaine. But after that, he just he I don't think, because being addicted to crack cocaine when you're a baby, I don't think he knew, like what he was, I think, he moves that addiction, he in other words, he did, it's not like he knew I was addicted to crack cocaine, I'm going to use crack cocaine. He just, when he grew older, he had issues, but he just didn't, he never
Mm.
delved back into it, from what I know though. But I'm not with the guy every day. He went to the army. He could have done something, but from what I know, he not hasn't used it. But
Oh,
he
fair enough.
experienced it too. He lived with it too. Like, living with drug addicted parents is crazy, and he experienced that. It's, if you want to, the best thing to keep people from using drugs, have them be the
Mm.
child of two drug addicted parents. That's the best way to keep kids from using drugs.
Oh, I'm sure because you got none of the fun and all the shit.
Yes, yes,
You don't
yes.
get any of the good feeling out of it. You just have to put up with somebody else's garbage.
It's one thing to show you guys what I mean, to encapsulate it. Um, the Christmas, the thing that actually got my mom to stop using drugs and to run away from my father was the Christmas before she ran. Um, and that Christmas, they bought us like a new game. Like, my mom, she had bought like a new gaming set because she had luckily got this job, and this job was paying her real well. And we had bought like a whole bunch of Christmas stuff. Like, she had bought like toys and everything. It was fantastic. And so Christmas morning, we opened up the toys. It was like the best Christmas we ever had, like ever. Like, think about this. Before that Christmas, we would get most of our Christmas presents from churches and people. It was funny because I remember we used to always hear those jokes about how the white people were evil, but we used to always say, the only people who ever give us gifts and toys were the white people. White people, how can they be so evil? Every Christmas it's all white people bringing us stuff. And it was sweet. It was a weird situation, but the day after Christmas, my father took all of our toys and went out and sold them on the street. All our brand new toys, everything, sold them on the street. And when we came home, we were like,
Mm.
what happened? What happened to the toys? They were all gone. So but that woke my mom up to say, I can't have my children living like this. And that's what sparked her to get out of the situation. Even though she couldn't beat the addiction, it was just enough to get her out of that situation. And obviously the fact that he was abusive to her. So
Well, and her addiction doesn't sound too dissimilar to many others. I mean, people don't usually kick immediately, say, "Oh, all better." A lot of times it's like stages of kicking for a bit, falling back, kicking for a bit,
mhm.
falling back. And from what I understand, she ultimately did completely kick it
Yeah, she did.
later on in life.
Yes. She did, and now she actually works with people who are struggling with addiction. That's her. She's a therapist. So it has come full circle for her.
How about your father?
My father, he died. He died of HIV/AIDS.
Oh, wow.
Back when I was like 18 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
but
was he doing heroin at the time too, or
no, he had actually just got out of heroin. He had just stopped, and
of course.
then he had stopped, and he had like changed his life around. So started going to the church, and he tried to find us, and he did. And when he did, he had like maybe 6 months to live. And actually, he died the day after my birthday. He died literally the day after my birthday. I got the call. My birthday, the next day, I got the call that your father had died. And I was like, oh. But it was like a person who I really didn't know. Like I never knew who the person was. I have his name. My grandfather was great. I knew my grandfather. It was funny. My grandfather used to tell me, he was like, don't become your father. He's like, that would be a failure. He was like, the best thing your father did was have you, but don't become your father. So that's from the end. That's what my grandfather used to always tell me.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a good experience with your grandparents. Like you weren't completely in the cold. You did have some figures in your life who were good examples for you.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, yes, it's going to be weird saying this, but for some reason, I don't know how, I don't know why, I was just a prodigy. I was a child prodigy in the sense of whenever I took a test, I got the highest scores. I don't know why. I could read amazingly. I knew things that most other people didn't know. Like, for instance, when I was in law school, I actually was able to take the bar while I was in law school. I was in the top of my class. It always came easy to me. I just don't know why. It just did.
And your LSAT was through the roof, right?
No, my LSAT was actually average. I studied for I took the LSAT. I studied for 2 weeks before I taken the LSAT, and I got I think a 153. But my undergraduate scores are so much. I got 7 I got 2 free rides to law school, and I got 7 offers with 7 scholarships. So it was outstanding for law school. But going back, the people in my life, I remember the first time I got an opportunity to show how I can do academically. It was my science teacher. And my science teacher, I forgot the question she asked me. She asked me some question. I think she was asking me some question about something. I forget what it was. And I answered it correctly. And I was in high school at the time. And I answered it correctly. And she said, what are you doing she's like, why do they have you in? Because they have classes. They have like the remedial class, the normal class, and then they have the exceptional class. And she was like, why are you in this class? Because I was in the remedial class. And I was like, that's where they put me, And I was, I'm loving it. So she was like, you know what? We're going to give you a test to see if you should be in this classroom. So I took the test and I scored like off the charts. And they put me in the gifted class. And it's so funny because in the remedial class, it was like with all the other black kids, I was happy. But then when they put me in the exceptional class, I'm going to say this. In that school, I had never seen another white kid. In the exceptional class, it was all white kids. I was like, where the hell have you guys ever been? And Jewish. I was like, where the hell you guys been? I didn't even know you guys existed in this school. And I was the only, and from that point on, I was the only black student in most of my classes. And what that did was start speaking to me. We're doing something wrong. Because, and that teacher, she used to call me Nat, because her brother's name was Nathaniel. And she used to call me Nat. And she said, Nat, she was like, the only person that's going to tell you that you can't do something is people who want to control you. And she said, she was like, they're going to tell you, go get welfare, do the housing projects, do that. She said, that's failure. She was like, it would be a waste of space if you don't use that mind for something. It doesn't have to be science. She was like, but you have to do something with this. And I've always remembered that, because I remember when I dropped out of high school, that was one of the things they told us. Oh, go down to the welfare office, do this, get some type of social services. That's what everybody was doing. Go to the housing project. They'll give you an apartment. And I still remember that. I was like, nah, I can go work. I can do this. I can do that. It was easy to do because it was all there for me. But that's kind of what turned me into kind of like the conservative liberal, where I was like, I was
going to say that you're really actually, I'm going to say it's more libertarian necessarily than conservative.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, you have a conservative background. Again, as I was researching, I was like, oh, he's hanging out with the atheist community. Now, what's
Yeah.
up with all that?
Well, I've, I've always been skeptical about everything.
Mhm,
So, like, religion. I became skeptical, very skeptical
mhm,
of religion, and I've been on this journey to figure out just what do I always say it like this: I want to believe the most true things and believe the
mhm,
least amount of false things possible. So I delved into at one point Buddhism, and I delved into Islam, and because I grew up in a Christian home, but from my
mhm.
perspective, Christianity did nothing for us. Christianity had me hungry, had me poor, had me living in boxes, had me running with and these were great Christian people, so just trying to find myself. And at a point, I just was like, you know what? None of these things seem to work for me. So at this point, I'm just going to say, until somebody can show me definitively that you have the right way, something that's real, then
Mhm.
then I'll believe it. But until then, I just don't. I'm not going to say your stuff is bad, but I'm not going to
Sure.
say I believe it. And it's interesting because in my family, I have my brother's a Muslim, my mother's a devout Christian. Um,
Mm.
and it's funny because I think sometimes I go to church more than she does, which is weird. Yeah. But that's just kind of how it went for me. I remember I was in church and went in law school, and you know how the law schools, they want you to do some type of service. So I was like, hey, and they're always downtown in the white neighborhoods doing service. So I say, hey, why don't you come to me in Harlem and just let's give some food away. So they were like, all right, we'll come to Harlem, but they didn't know how bad the issues were in the black community. So we went to Harlem,
Mm.
and I took them to my church, and I was like, oh, we can bring out my church, let's give out food. And this was pre-COVID, and the line to get food, because we were giving out food. The line to get food were about 3 blocks long. So you're talking about 3 blocks, and this is pre-COVID. This
Oh,
is
wow.
nothing. And these were regular everyday people, and they had a questionnaire, and they would ask people like, or do you need any other services? Why are you getting food? And a lot of people were like, we're here because we don't make enough to get as much food as we can and to pay rent. So this is helping us do that. And from that point on, the law school started doing that. They started sending people out and donating to this place. But it's weird to understand that there's so many people in that community that need help, but the government, I think the problem is that the government sees them not as people to not as people. It's that old adage. You can
No,
you
you
can
caught it. Not as people.
it's maybe
Sorry.
not. Maybe, no, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right because I've always felt that why not think about this. One of the weirdest things that I've ever noticed here in New York City right now. If you're a black man, any minority, right, and you want to go to
Mhm,
college and get a college degree, right? I got all my college stuff for free except for law school. I had to take out money to live because I had to go. I was going full time. That's the only reason why I have loans. But my education actually was for free, law school
mhm.
and undergraduate. If right now, if you're a minority in New York, you can go to undergraduate for free. You can go to graduate school for free. Not only for free, they'll pay for your books and give you a stipend to go. Right? They give you money to go, and the majority of black men and women don't take it. Right? They don't take
Probably
that
because it's
opportunity.
free. Probably because it's free.
But
They're
that
not
that but
they're not earning it. I
but
know,
that
I mean,
doesn't make any sense to
that's
me. It's like
well, of course it doesn't make sense, but I kind of it doesn't make sense, but I understand that. There is that principle of I'll go way left field. I don't know if you've heard of Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew,
I've heard
but
Dr.
they
Drew, but
talk.
not Adam Crow. Yeah, I know. I know you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, they would go to college campuses and they would play shows, right?
Mhm.
And it would be free for students. And there'd be like 10 people in the audience. And this is during the height when they are on MTV and everything else. And Carolla's argument is like, make everybody pay $1, make everybody pay $5.
Mhm.
And as soon as people started to pay, they started to fill up more.
Oh.
You've got to have some skin in the game. And I really do believe in that. And I'm not saying to be,
Mm.
arduous, but I think that you gotta earn it or it has no value to you. If it's something that's just given to you, who cares?
You're probably right. You're probably right because I I remember just talking to just my friends. The like I knew people who were selling drugs. I knew people, and just telling them like, hey,
Mhm.
you can just go. You can go school free, and I'll pay you to go. And you're right. They
Right.
just they did not see the value in
There
that,
value.
and there was no value. No value to them. No value to them. Crazy.
Exactly. And,
It's
and maybe
insane.
that's my own weird philosophy, but I deeply believe in that. I mean, and that's part of the reason I'm so anti participation trophies and all
Yeah,
kinds
yeah,
of
I'm not
stuff
for
like
that.
that
Yeah.
because well, but because the kids know. It's like, okay, you give them a trophy for showing up. Well, the only time they care is they're hurt that they didn't get the trophy that day or whatever. It's like, no, you've got to achieve. And then when they actually do get the opportunity to achieve, they
Mhm.
feel it. And all the
Yeah,
other kids, they know they're all keeping scores. You might say there's no score for the game, but I guarantee they can tell you who scored more points.
yeah, yeah.
And
But I also think I think you're right. And I think that's why the liberal system here in New York is failing. The minority community, because they think if we just give it to them for free, they'll take advantage of it, not knowing that they have to have some skin in the game. Not knowing they
I
have to
think
have some
so.
skin in the game.
I think so. And other issues, and I don't live in New York, so I'm making
Mhm.
just giant presumptuous statements. But it's YouTube, so I've got to say dumb things, or I won't be a proper channel. What
Uh,
about things like vouchers and stuff like that, to where there were different types of schools can compete with each other
well,
versus just dumping money?
well, well. Just full disclosure. I'm a huge proponent of vouchers. I'm a huge proponent of getting rid of the monopoly on school choice. I've seen it myself.
Mhm.
Um, for instance, with my own children, we have, for instance, and it shows you. And again, this people are going to think I'm a big R Republican, but I'm not. But I
Compared to
just
some of your peers, you are now.
I've just lived I just live under the oppressive liberal state, and that's why I'll rash out against it. But this is insane. This is insane what you're about to hear. But in New York City and Harlem, the best schools in the city are Success Academy charter schools. They are the top schools in the state.
I think by all
Um,
accounts, right? Like,
yes,
they've
I
tested
mean
100 different ways and every single
99
time.
percentile in math, and there used to be what happens is in New York there's a place called Scarsdale, which is a
Mhm.
very affluent white neighborhood where the children there score usually test off the charts. And they used to call it the Harlem Scarsdale gap. The gap for the how the children perform in Scarsdale versus how the in public schools versus how the children perform in Harlem. If you remove all the other public schools and put just Success Academy charter schools, they beat the people in Scarsdale.
Go
Their
figure.
numbers are better than theirs. So you would think like, hey,
It costs less to run too.
we got it. We got it. But this is where liberal politics starts destroying everything. Now, I lived in now when I got back to Harlem, I got a co-op in Harlem. And so I've been living there for a while. And I saw the neighborhood change. I saw the neighborhood change from dirt poor to all of a sudden apartments that were going for $500 a month are now going for $3,000 a month, right? It was that dramatic. But it was that dramatic because the schools were better, right? Now you have these
Mhm.
charter schools that you can send your kid to, and they're in the best schools in the state. Crime, because Giuliani came in and he's like, yo, we're going to start with small and move big. All these petty crimes, all the jumping the turnstiles, all the smoking weed on the street, all this. We're going to stop all that. And we're going to send the cops to the areas that need the help. They don't need help down where Trump is living. They need help in Harlem. So he
Mhm.
sent all the cops to those neighborhoods. And for a time, it's safe to walk the streets again. Now it's safe to be in the community. And then all of a sudden, now instead of the community being 90% black, it became 50% black. And now I think it's even 40% black. So success kind of started getting this, forcing people to move out, because now people who lived there couldn't. So that was the detriment of it, because when you improve the community, the people who lived there who could most benefit couldn't afford to stay there anymore. So that was a detriment to it. And I saw it happen. But one thing that started happening with charter schools is that there was then started to have this push to close the charter schools. And I'm like, why would you want, like, De Blasio hates Success Academy charter schools. Now at the end, and so they had this whole push about, the numbers were fake. They're only picking the best students. They're only doing this. They're only doing this. And it got to the point where I actually started advocating. I'm out there advocating for charter schools. And we had this, like, we have community board meetings. So they're talking about it. And I stood up and I just was honest. I said, we as people of color, but I said, we as Black people, we sit here and always say, why are the best schools in Scarsdale? Why is this? Why is that? And I said, they put the best schools in our neighborhoods and tell it, send your kids to these schools. And now the first thing we got to sit here and say, close them down. This makes no sense. And half the people in here don't want to send your kid to the good school because you don't want to do the work for them. The kids got to do homework. The kid, they're going to hold you accountable. And now so it's all, if you are going to sit here and blame the evil white man for giving you the best schools in New York and putting it right here so you send your kids there and say, we want them out of here, then don't tell me this bullshit about you want to make the community better. No, you want a handout. And so that's, I always think that's the fight here in New York. It's do you want the handout, or do you want to work for it? And I don't know. It's a battle that I think it's going to be lost. It's not going to be one of my generation. It's probably going to be one, hopefully my children's generation, to understand that it's not about race. It's about a way of thinking. It's this.
I think it's about class, because it drives me crazy that there's a viewpoint that the only poor people in America are Black.
No, not at all.
And the truth is, the minority of poor people, and minority period, are Black. There are far more poor white people in America than there are Black people in America. I would actually argue there's more poor white people than there are all Black people in America.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because you're 13% of the population. Yeah, I agree with that.
And instead of focusing so much on race, why don't we focus on economics? Because truthfully, if we're really worried about the class structure, the race problem is going to get straightened out too. I mean, if you're poor and Black, you're going to get help the same as if you're white and poor. And that can help balance things.
But the thing is that I'm going to disagree with that for two reasons. Number one, there's a history of things like redlining, right? Sure. And what I mean by, and for those of you who don't know what redlining was the policy of the U.S. government. U.S. government would back mortgages for homes, and what it was designed to do was to create a stable middle class in the United States. So the government was saying, if you want to buy a home, we'll back your mortgage. And then those people moved into those homes, and then 30 years later, they had $300,000 homes that they paid off that they can pass to their children. So that's why, if you look at just the average wealth of a white family home, it's something like $197,000, with the average wealth of a Black family home is like $15,000. That disparity happened to do with the investment in things like education, but in housing and real estate. Real estate prices always go up 3% a year. So it was an investment both in the person and in the community. Mm-hmm. So what redlining did was say that if you happen to be Black, you couldn't get that loan. And as an added bonus, if you moved into a white neighborhood where the people were getting the loans, that would bar anyone else in there from getting the loans too. And so that was the concept of redlining. Now, I say that to say this. I think they're trying to combat. How do you combat that? Because now you have all of that wealth that's kind of been hidden from these people that they weren't able to take advantage of. So it's like, at this point in time, you can't. It's like starting a race. One side gets to the one step before the finish line, and you're saying go. You know what I'm saying? How do you close that gap? And I think there are different ways you can do it. I know for those people, a lot of people talk about the like urban HUD, for instance. HUD was one of the ways they wanted to do that.
Mhm.
Urban development, urban housing development, where they would do the same thing, back loans for minority candidates and stuff. But a lot of black people, unfortunately, don't take advantage of that. But there has to be some way to bridge that wealth gap
Can I
between
push
the
back a
black
little
and
now?
community. Sure, definitely, of course, yeah.
All right, my turn. Um, well, let's really get realistic on who is actually a victim and who can prove this or who can prove this. I'll give you an example. I live in Hampton, Virginia.
Mhm.
We have Hampton University. Barack Obama came here all the freaking time, talking at the university as president.
Mhm.
Why? All the kids go here are from the richest parts of Chicago.
Mhm.
Oh, guess what? We also have in Hampton. We're in the South. Hampton was known because it was so racist that we burned down, or not we, but the
Yeah, I
town burned
remember.
down its own place
Yeah,
to prevent it from going to the freed slaves.
yeah.
Quote, contraband is what they called it.
Mhm.
And the whole 1619 project, just down the road, Hampton U.
Oh,
That's the place. Well, these kids are rich. And I mean rich, rich, rich.
yeah, Hampton.
Also, there's something I think it's called DOS. I don't know if you've heard the term before.
Mm.
Descendants of slavery.
Oh,
And the argument of DOS is that everything's a distraction because we have people here from the Caribbean, people here from
of
Africa, people
course.
here from all over, right? Well, not every African American or black, because not everybody is from Africa. That anyway,
Mhm.
is technically a descendant of slavery.
Yes,
So if we could
agreed.
start parsing this knowledge, like you bring up the red line, that's a great point. Who was actually affected? Let's see if we can parse that down a little bit more and say, okay, we got a track record that this family line was affected, or that you can actually make a claim the same way as Native Americans can make a claim through genealogy that they are part of a tribe. Why not say, okay, you are in fact a descendant of slavery, you therefore have X,
Mhm. I agree
rather
with
than
that.
just
I'm
all the
not disagreeing with
blanket
anything you're saying.
programs. And I guess the big problem is that right now everything is really blanketed. You
Yes,
just mentioned
yes.
in New York, if you're black, you can get anything, right? Well, what if you're white and poor in New York? What does one get? I'm curious.
It's going to be tougher. It's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be a lot tougher. I'll say this,
And you're
even
an
at
Irish immigrant descendant, though, and
oh
you
my
grew
god.
up in ghettos. I mean, generation after generation after generation, you never owned slaves, never believed it. As a matter of fact, you hated
Slavery.
slavery ending. Why? Because you lost your great 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 grandparents lost their jobs due to
Mhm,
freed slaves.
mhm.
Well, that's some of that white privilege they have. So I'm saying we got to get into nuance and parsing.
No, of course, of course. Yeah, um, um, I I don't want to give a blanket generalized grievance. In other words, saying every black
Sure.
person should get this, and of course I would say that you have to parse it out. But I do think when the disparity are so much,
Right.
we have to be able to come to some reasonable conclusion to say,
Oh, I agree.
okay, let's maybe let's see well, if this policy worked here, maybe it'll work here. Let's try to do something, and I think we can do it in a way that doesn't disenfranchise other citizens, right? Like for instance, in law school, sometimes at one point I had to I was evaluating applications for those who are going to get into law school, and sometimes it just came down to race. But think about this. There was one student. I have a student who has a 3.0 GPA,
Mhm.
and they have an average LSAT score. Happens to be black, and I have a
Mhm.
white student. Same numbers. Happens to be white, right?
Mhm.
But in the overall picture, this white student, I have maybe about another 100 white students like this, who with these qualifications that are willing to come through that are able to come through the door.
Mhm.
For a black student to get a 150 on the LSAT, that means that person's in the top 10% of all black people who took the goddamn test.
Oh, I agree with that, and
That's an average.
that's an argument of all things being equal.
Yeah, yeah. No, no.
And I
When I'm
think I think most would agree. Like, you know what? If it comes down to it, boom, and it's a tie. Yeah, we've got a historical problem. Let's go with it.
yeah, yeah,
But let's
yeah.
skew the numbers a little bit more.
Hmm.
And now let's say that They both don't have a 150.
Hmm.
I don't know what's the highest on an LSAT.
It's a 180.
Okay, let's say one is 170
Hmm.
and the other one's a 150. And let's say the 170 is also from a poor background.
Hmm.
Or actually, let's just save time. Let's say you're Asian and trying to get into Harvard.
Mm, mm, mm.
That's where I think that there are the problems. I understand giving an extra bump, and I actually totally agree with that. And hopefully, I didn't piss off half my audience
No, no, no.
my statements. But the truth is, I think that when you get into equality, absolutely, and I would argue that somebody who's underprivileged has had a harder time, and giving them a slight bump is cool.
Hmm.
But taking other people down, I have problems with that.
Oh, of course,
Another
yeah, that's
issue too
horrible.
is what if that black student happens to be one of those kids at Hampton U whose parents are rich as can be?
Yeah.
Should they get a full ride? And no, this is relevant to me because I think that you're taken away from potentially a street kid who doesn't have the money, whatever the race might be. I think the economics need to come into effect here
Yeah, yeah.
as well.
No, I think you're 110% right. I think race. I think the Supreme Court gets it right in this case. It's called the Grutter gloss. For all of you who don't know, there's a case called Grutter v. Michigan. It's a
Mm,
fascinating case. It's about this particular issue about admissions into law schools based on race, and the Supreme Court said race obviously should be a factor. But it shouldn't be a determinative factor. You shouldn't say, "Well, I need 10 black kids, right? Or I need 5 white kids, or since I need an extra black kid, I'm gonna take this black kid over this white kid." You have to look at it holistically. What's the population? How many black kids do you have applying to the school? What's the percentage of the population? All these factors, is that person from an affluent neighborhood versus, and if you take all those factors into effect, then you can start, then race could be a factor that you
sure.
use, but it's not the determinative factor.
Also, good
So
exposure too. Like
yes,
you got to hang out with white kids and you never knew any. I think it's great for white kids to have blacks amongst their midst and to understand or get more exposure and experience.
and this is what I think is the problem today. And I want to circle it back to what I think the problem is today with having this conversation is
Mm,
because most people think this conversation is against, I want to help black people and you want to just like when I have this conversation with liberals, they'll say, "Oh, well, you want to hurt black people." I'm like, "No, I don't want to, I'm looking for a system that's fair for everybody because it doesn't,
sure.
somebody who's like, just because my ancestors 200 years ago were slaves doesn't mean that
Mhm.
I should now get advantages that I'm not entitled to. If I'm making $300,000 a year, well, just because I'm black, that's just as wrong, just like you're saying in the system.
Mhm.
So I think when we circle it back, the one thing that this conversation is about is that we all know where we want to get. It's just we have different
Right.
ideas on how to get there. And I think that's where that's the way the conversation should be had. And I agree with you 100%. I think people need to know the truth about what it means to be black in America, but also how I think the system is failing black people. And it's time to stop turning a blind eye to both how the mental process of being black and what it means to be the nanny state. We're going to take care of you, and
Mhm.
start having people start taking responsibility for their own actions and saying, how can we make this better? How can we convince these black people? Obviously giving it to them for free is not working, but then how can we convince them to actually do it so they can take advantage of it? And then because now what you have this weird situation where they'll say, well, I can't get an education, but you say you can get it for free, and then they don't take advantage of it. But then you're saying, well, it's like, whose fault is it then? Because again, here in New
Sure.
York, these people can go to school for free.
Well, and there are other factors that have come up before too, like trying to give education that is at a level that is comfortable for the student. As an example, we have a tendency to absolutely love Ivy Leagues,
Mhm.
but some of the best lawyers in America are from state schools,
Yeah.
using
That's
your
true. Yeah.
profession.
Yeah.
I'd say the majority of them. But what happens is sometimes you have somebody getting into, shall we say, too far above their ability level, and then they feel like an outcast inside of that school. Whereas maybe we should erase some things. I have a lot of spinning social theory in my head. Malcolm Gladwell, you should check out a couple podcasts he had about the LSAT. It's very fascinating. He was saying that you should just have a law degree, yes or no, and not name the school whenever applying for a job.
Hmm. Actually, but that's usually definitely. It's funny because right out of law school, it matters where you went to school. But
Mm.
5 to 10 years out, it doesn't matter. Right. That's for some reason that's just the way it works. Like now, when I graduated, I knew I was going to be a prosecutor. Right. I knew where I was going. So it was funny because I had gotten to the University of Miami. So my wife, my wife is like So I remember when I got there, she was like, we went there, and I'm telling you, the I hate to say this, but my wife was like so jealous because it was like some of the most attractive bodies down there. Women, men, it was just like crazy. And I remember when we were down there, and they had the most attractive woman giving us like a little tour or whatever. And she says, and so we were all talking, like the students. So they thought my wife was a student because we were both young. So they thought she was a student too. And they said, oh, we have some of the craziest parties and it's going to be amazing. You're going to love it. Oh my God.
Shut up. Shut up.
And my wife is funny because I got a great package from the University of Miami. And my wife kid, and she said, nah, it's not happening. It's not happening. You're not leaving New York. You're not leaving New York. You got too many, this, it was a great thing, but you're not going to the University. Because then I would have to, go down there and leave, and, leave her up here. She's like, you're not going to the University of Miami, staying up here. But I think you're right in a sense. It is the feeling here, I think, even in the system. I think right now, the biggest failing of African Americans, before we move on to our next topic, I think the biggest failing right now for African Americans in New York is the public school system. The public school system here is an abject failure. It just is. The charter school system is great. The public school system is an abject failure. It's a liberal failure. It's just people getting paid. They have more people. They had at one point more people getting paid not to teach than they did to teach. It is just an abject failure. And the people coming out of these schools are just, and the only reason why I did well coming out of public school was because I had a white teacher see that I was more than just some kid that was just out there doing crazy shit and put me on a track where to say, hey, this guy can be something. And I still dropped out of high school. I still, even with all that, still dropped out of high school because there was I didn't see the value in the education. But it was funny because I did remember one of the most interesting things going from being I call it the stupid class to the super smart class. When I was in the stupid class, it was all about going out there and surviving, try to find a job, you want to do this, you want to try to stay out of school. When I got to the super smart class, it was all about making my own wealth. Hey, here's a business leader telling you how to start a business. Here's some, why not? These are the people you want to employ. Like the whole messaging was different, right? In that class versus the dumb class. And I think the messaging has to change in public schools.
Okay.
In New York.
That's a perfect point to wrap it up. I know you have to pick up your kids. And
I have Go ahead.
And that actually walks right into our next discussion if we want to go into it. But schools, in fact, public education was created for creating factory workers. That is a fact that's been proven pedagogically. Everything about it is shut up, sit in your place, and go get that job. Go listen to the man and go do your thing.
Wow.
So hopefully soon you're going to come back and we're going to fix the world.
We'll try. We'll try. You know what? I do want to say thank you so much for having me. And I'm sorry I talk so much about this one particular issue, but it's always been and I will say this for everyone out there. Things are not what they seem in the sense of I'm a kid from Harlem, and every time I could have been the guy who was in jail, who was this, who was that. And my until I started thinking for myself and not being told what to think, that was the only way I was able to grow. Going from someone who dropped out of high school, who got a GED, who did all these things to try to make something of my life. It's just been an amazing journey. One of the key points of my life was when I applied to become an officer. when I applied to become an officer, when I went and put that application in, and they said, why do you want to do this? And I said, I want to do this because, I want to help somebody. I want to be better. And I got that job. And then when my boss said, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And I said, I want to do law. He said, well, hey, why don't you go to law school? And all those opportunities came not because I sat on my ass and somebody handed them to me. It was hard work. It was hard goddamn work. And I think that is the key point. If anything you learn from the day, it is not what somebody's going to hand you out, because like here they're handing out free educations. People just are rejecting them. It's about what you want and what you and how you're going to go for it. And if you do, you will make it. And I'm a testament to that. I'm a testament, but it's not luck, because a lot of people say it's luck. It is about your skin color. It's not. It's about hard work, getting off your ass and making it happen. And that's what it's always been about.
Dude, that's so perfect, man. Thank you so much. And folks, if you want to see Nate next time, you got to subscribe.
Now you learned to tell the people to subscribe people.
I'm terrible at it because I hate begging, but it's kind of like,
well, think of it as reminding.
That's it. You know what? Whatever's more effective. It could be a beg. It could be a reminder. Whatever initiates the action. New tongue, just breaking it in.
Well, thank you
so much.
And thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Dude, it was an honor having you.